In this day and age, it's very rare for an NBA team to let their star or superstar walk in free agency. Heck, teams nowadays hand out max contracts left and right because they want to retain their players. But sometimes that leads to them being overpaid and a detriment to their franchise. In this video, however, what happens when a team lowballs their guys and then feel instant regret when they see them flourish on another team? Let's take a look at 6 NBA teams who lowballed their players and suffered immediate consequences.
They're going to choose not to re-sign some of their free agents, and they may have to make a trade or two or let a player go. And they're going to try and make enough room to make Shaq happy.
Hey folks, before we start, I'd like to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of this video, Raycon. While I'm not in school anymore, my favorite pastime is going back to school shopping with my parents. And for those who are going back, Raycon's essential open earbuds are a must-have for everybody. These earbuds keep your ears open while still delivering crystal clear sound with quality that rivals that of the big premium audio brands, but at half the price. The design is super lightweight and comfortable to wear for long hours at a time. And the best part? They have a 30-day happiness guarantee policy, so if by any chance you don't like them, you can return them and get your money back. Personally, I use mine all the time around the house when I'm eating or doing chores or walking around the neighborhood. And because they fit so comfortably in my ears, it doesn't bother me at all. Other features include their multi-point connectivity to connect and switch through multiple devices and 36 hours of battery life, which includes 8-hour earbuds and a 36-hour battery case. Click the link in the description below or go to buyraycon.com/hoopsopen to get 20% off. That's buyraycon.com/hoopsopen. The Orlando Magic. In 1996, the Orlando Sentinel newspaper ran a poll asking their readers if Shaquille O'Neal, the superstar of the franchise, was worth $115 million. About 5,000 people voted, and the overwhelming majority of them said no, he was not worth that much. However, this was a ridiculous poll to begin with, because at that time, nobody had a contract that was anywhere close to that value. $115 million for any NBA contract was unheard of back then. Heck, you could have made the same poll about Michael Jordan and most voters would still say no. Basically, the Orlando Sentinel did their own 1990s version of a rage bait, and this poll reached the national spotlight as Shaq became furious at the results. The Orlando Sentinel was renowned for disparaging the Magic. A ton of negative headlines rubbed the players the wrong way, so it wasn't just Shaq. But what exactly did the Orlando Magic offer him? Well, the reports on this are kinda iffy. I did some research and found out that the Magic initially offered him 4 years, $54 million, a pathetic offer. But other sources claim their offer was 6 years, $95 million. Either way, it was too low. For comparison, other big men at the time like Alonzo Mourning and Juwan Howard both recently signed to a 7-year, $105 million deal. Shaq was a far superior player than either of them, so he should be making more. However, the poll from the Orlando Sentinel wasn't the reason the Magic lowballed Shaq. I mean, it's stupid to consider a newspaper poll in the first place when you're making the biggest decision in the history of this young franchise. They hesitated because they were unsure of Shaq being the future of this team. While yes, he did lead the Magic to the finals a year prior, they had just gotten swept by the Chicago Bulls, and Shaq's commitment and work ethic were called into question.
Have been swept from the playoffs for the 3rd straight season.
They felt he had the skills to be the most dominant center in history, but he didn't show the level of hunger or motivation the Magic hoped he would. On top of this, the DeVos family, they were very cheap. The team was still a new expansion team after all, so committing over $100 million to any single player was a risky choice from their perspective. Eventually, the Lakers reached out and Shaq came to terms with a 7-year deal worth $121 million, a contract that Shaq happily accepted. The Magic were now desperate, so they spun back and tried to match that offer, but it was too late. They lost their franchise player for nothing and watched him win 3 consecutive titles in Los Angeles. In hindsight, some folks have speculated Shaq was leaving regardless, and even if the Magic did not lowball him, he still had his eyes set on LA. That was the environment Shaq yearned to go to. Part of it was because he felt Penny Hardaway was taking more of the spotlight from him in Orlando, and the team perhaps perceived Penny as the golden child of the franchise, as they prioritized him instead of Shaq. Regardless, I think Shaq would have still left, but lowballing him was definitely the final straw. The Minnesota Timberwolves. Chauncey Billups was known for his many years as a staple of the Detroit Pistons. He was arguably their most important player, but he had quite a rough journey getting there. As the third pick of the 1997 draft, it took him a while to figure out how to best use his skills at the NBA level. Drafted by the Boston Celtics, he literally got traded midway through his rookie season. For that to happen to a 5-star prospect of his caliber, it's pretty damn rare. But he had some attitude problems, and had a rough time getting along with his teammates. At the time when he was young, his ego was a bit too big, and his career was off to a shaky start. Fast forward to the 2002 offseason. Billups had been playing for the Wolves the previous 2 seasons, and he just had a breakout year. He played all 82 games, he displayed a much improved 3-point shot, and above all else, he matured a lot. His entire attitude changed. Instead of the preconceived notion that he was selfish, Billups put all that behind him. As a Timberwolf, he had mentors to help him, and as the season progressed, Billups, under the guidance of his vets, developed into an incredible leader. In fact, his leadership and intangibles were irreplaceable for a team that was struggling to make noise in the playoffs. Sam Mitchell, a guy known for being a head coach, was actually Billups' teammate on the Wolves, and he noticed, quote, "You had heard he was a selfish guy, not a good teammate, that all he wanted to do was shoot the ball. But now he's asking me 1,000 questions. I was like, this is not the guy I heard about." He said in Boston, no one ever tried to teach him the position. Billups developed a lot in Minnesota and became the ideal point guard alongside Kevin Garnett, and they were very close friends. In theory, it seems like a no-brainer to re-sign Chauncey Billups when it was obvious he was only going to get better from here. He really wanted to remain a Timberwolf for life, but the Wolves did not want to commit to him. They preferred to wait until their veteran point guard Terrell Brandon comes back from knee surgery. They wanted this guy to be the starting point guard because he was a former All-Star and he was more experienced than Billups. It turns out Terrell Brandon's knee injury was so serious he never played another NBA game, so they let Billups walk for nothing. This was just one of many screw-ups the Wolves carried out during this tumultuous era. So with a breakout season under his belt, Billups had more options. That's when the Pistons came swooping in with an offer of 6 years, $34 million. A very good deal for a player who would lead them to 6 straight appearances in the conference finals, including 2 finals appearances, 1 championship, and a finals MVP. This contract was one of the biggest deals in the history of NBA free agency. Yet the Wolves did not even consider re-signing him. The worst part, they never even gave him an offer. I know this video is about lowball offers, but I guess $0 still counts as a lowball, right? The Phoenix Suns. The 2004-05 Suns were an iconic team. It was the first year Steve Nash arrived and instantly transformed the franchise from a bottom-tier lottery team to the NBA's best regular season team, the #1 record in the entire league. If you recall, that team was quite stacked. You had a young Amari Stoudemire, Sean Marion in his prime, and a 23-year-old Joe Johnson, who just had an otherworldly season playing alongside Nash.
But it winds up in the hands of Richardson.
At this point, Johnson had yet to become an All-Star, but his potential was very clear when you watched him play. Unfortunately, his contract expired and he became one of the most coveted free agents in the 2005 offseason. That's when the hectic negotiations started. Initially, Johnson wanted to remain in Phoenix, and he was willing to take a team-friendly contract if it meant giving them a better chance to win a title. But upon meeting the new owner, Robert Sarver, who just purchased the team in 2004, Johnson did not get a great vibe from him. He hoped Sarver would be receptive of giving him a 6-year contract worth about $50 million. That's all he asked for. I mean, that's reasonable. I'd go as far as to say that's a steal for Joe Johnson, who ultimately became a perennial All-Star. But Sarver blew him off immediately. Around this time, Johnson was heavily courted by other teams, one of which, the Atlanta Hawks, who sweetened the deal by telling him, "You'll be the #1 option on this team." Technically, Johnson was a restricted free agent, so the Suns could match any offer to keep him. But since his relationship with Sarver was very negative, he asked him to not match the Hawks' offer. So Sarver did not, and thus the era of Joe Johnson in Phoenix came to an end. Sarver is not one to admit his mistakes, but decades later, he did admit to his mistake, and letting Joe Johnson go was his deepest regret. I beat myself about that one because we were in a position where that piece could have helped us probably extend our chance to run for a longer period of time. He was right. Without Johnson, the Suns had a much tougher road to win the title, and ultimately, they could not do it. The Detroit Pistons. Much like Billups, Ben Wallace had a hard time finding a home until his arrival to Detroit. And when you think of this era of Pistons basketball, there's nothing more iconic than his signature throw, and his extraordinary toughness and grit as an undersized center. He took on the insurmountable task that even the best big men in history could not handle. There's no doubt he had been an integral piece of the franchise for so long, and it was almost guaranteed he'd be a Piston for life. He exuded that kind of energy. He represented everything Detroit was about. But after losing in the 2006 playoffs in a disappointing fashion and he entered free agency, the Pistons had mixed feelings on Wallace. As great as he is a defender, he's just as weak offensively. After much negotiation, GM Joe Dumars' final offer to Wallace was 4 years, $48 million. His reasoning was he felt like the Pistons needed the extra cap space to improve other parts of their roster. They were already a very strong defensive team at every position, even without Wallace, but what they really needed was another shot creator, more shooting, more offense. Because in the playoffs, their lack of offensive creativity always stunted them. So Dumars did not value Wallace as highly as he should have. So he tested free agency. The Chicago Bulls offered him a 4-year, $60 million deal, which he accepted. Coincidentally, the Pistons and Bulls met in the playoffs a year later, in 2007, with the Pistons winning that series. Yet despite making the conference finals again, the Pistons' defense got picked apart at a level unseen in years.
What a shot by LeBron James, off balance, goes behind the back, and the game is tied.
The legendary Game 5 against the Cavaliers, LeBron scored 25 straight points, most of which were straight drives to the rim. Without Wallace manning the paint, there was a gaping hole in the Pistons' defense that was impossible to cover up. It was this series when Joe Dumars realized he made a mistake. Had Wallace still been there, I seriously doubt LeBron would pop off like this, considering they beat them last year with Wallace. Considering how horrendous the rest of the Cavs roster was, this loss was embarrassing for the Pistons, who had a far more well-rounded roster. Joe Dumars was wrong. They did in fact need Big Ben. The Oklahoma City Thunder. What more needs to be said? A young Thunder team led by a trio of stars who were like 22, 23 years old. They had all the potential in the world to take over the NBA and launch a new dynasty for years to come. Except you know what happened here. Following their loss in the 2012 finals, James Harden entered the offseason with expectations to sign an extension and continue growing alongside everyone else. Unfortunately, they had a hard time coming to an agreement. Now, I'm not sure how much of the blame should go to Sam Presti, because it's not his fault OKC's ownership did not want to go into the luxury tax. So he had a very thin margin of error, and the most he could offer Harden was around 4 years, $55 million. Harden wanted 4 years, $60 million. What people don't remember is Presti kind of rushed the whole thing. Harden did not even reject OKC's initial offer. He was actually thinking about it, mulling it over. He didn't even have much time to think it over before Presti realized the longer they wait, the riskier it becomes. If Harden dragged out the negotiations, they might not come to an agreement at all, and the trade market would dry up. So he made his move quickly. The trade involving Harden netted OKC Kevin Martin, Jeremy Lamb, and several draft picks, one of which turned into Steven Adams. Martin was only there for 1 season, Lamb was completely useless, and Adams became a valuable role player, but that's nothing compared to what James Harden became. Some believe that Harden's lackluster performance in the finals was a reason why they didn't give him the full max he wanted. But honestly, it was mainly the luxury tax that OKC tried to avoid. Some believed Harden wanted to lead his own team. Even if OKC offered more money, perhaps he would have left for Houston regardless. So it's likely this young core had no chance of staying together for the long haul. The Dallas Mavericks. In the 2004 offseason, Mark Cuban had a difficult decision to make. They've been competing in the playoffs with their big three of Nowitzki, Finley, and Nash for many years now, but they've yet to get over the hump. Cuban loved his guys, especially Steve, so the thought of him letting him go was hard to swallow. But he had his reasons. For one, Nash just had one of his least productive seasons in a while. Second, he was approaching 30 years old with an emerging history of back problems. Third, the Mavs wanted to go all in to build around Dirk, and Cuban did not think Nash was a good point guard to pair him with. Honestly, all of these points were valid. You gotta remember, before Nash's arrival to Phoenix, he was nowhere near an MVP caliber player. Cuban offered Nash a 5-year, $51 million deal, which was still a significant amount. The salary cap back then was just over $40 million, so Nash was getting paid 1/4 of the cap. But the Suns swooped in with a larger 6-year, $66 million contract, which Nash gladly accepted. He considered staying in Dallas, but the Suns made a very strong pitch to get him to Phoenix, citing their desire to play a more up-tempo game, with young athletic players to run alongside you. The 7 seconds or less offense was made possible by Nash, and it unlocked a new level that nobody knew he had. To add salt to the wound, in Nash's first year in Phoenix, they played the Mavs in the playoffs, and they trounced them. In that series, Nash was out for revenge. The dude averaged 30 and 12 on absurdly efficient shooting. That was the greatest series performance he ever had. In hindsight, Cuban regret his decision to let him go, but in reality, it was better for both parties. In Dallas, they were the slowest team in the league, as Nowitzki operated better in a slow offense, but that hindered Nash from reaching his full potential. So him going to Phoenix, I think it played out as well as it could have. Anyway, that's all folks. Those were 6 NBA teams who lowballed a player and then immediately felt regret. Let me know your thoughts, let me know in the comments what you thought about these players in this video. And can you think of any other teams that made a mistake like this? Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.